Hello and welcome to another Hollywood Experience. You want a Hollywood Experience? We got it for you here at the Sword Experience podcast. I'm joined today, quarantined as ever, David Bethke here. David, how you doing?
Doing really well. We're miles away, but we feel like we're right next to each other.
Well, actually, we have been. But we're launching this whole Patreon thing, which has been an eye opener, I think, as we've been going along.
Mm-hmm. No, it's something we've been figuring out, but I think we've been having a good time with it, and it's been really fun doing this. Just I'm having a great time with the whole Patreon podcast thing.
You know, I've actually been looking at how long it took us to put it together, and I was actually looking at notes back in 2017, 2018.
Yes, yeah.
You know, it's been a while that we've been thinking about this, but this was obviously the perfect opportunity to sort of bring something to people so that they don't get bored. And, you know, all of you out there that are eating too much, you know, and not stretching and sitting down, you need to make sure that you don't. Because if you do, what will end up happening when you go back to working out or back to doing all your stuff, you're going to get aches and pains. And, you know, stuff needs to be oiled nicely, right?
Loose. You got to stay loose. You got to stay
loose
flexible.
Loose as a goose.
Yes, exactly. No, when I'm even when I'm just sitting at a desk, I'm like, 20 minutes in, I'm like, oh, I should probably stretch now. And even stretching after just sitting at a desk, doing whatever at the computer, doing whatever Sword Experience stuff I'm doing, it's worlds different. When you stretch, whenever you flex, just bend your knees, stand up, do whatever. It feels great just to do even that kind of stuff at a desk.
Well, you know, I mean, the funny thing is I've actually not been stretching and not been working out a lot because I've been doing a lot of this stuff and doing exactly that, sitting at a desk. And I realize how tight I've gotten. So, you know, I think a lot of people will actually benefit from it. And that's part of what we're doing right now on the Sword Experience training sessions is, you know, just stretching. We're working on a bunch of stretches, especially for the hips, which actually are joined to absolutely everything, you know, like the hips and the knees and all that. I mean, when you're doing stunts, for instance, you've got to make sure you're very loose. And, you know, the funny thing is I was speaking with one of my trainers, one of the guys that is working with us on Lifestyle Essentials, our magazine that we send out each week to people.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're saying, you know, there's Olympic trainers, you know, Olympic athletes, some of them, you know, are not stretching. And it's a recipe for disaster because at some point that hamstring, when they overstretch it, is gonna pop, or you know, or something happened to the knee joint. You know, the quadricep tendonitis is a very good one, which I've actually had a little mild case of.
And and when that's your livelihood, that's not something that you want to happen.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
No, you don't. You don't want that to be the thing that stops you from.
Being able to work.
Performing. Exactly. Talking of work, I want to talk about somebody that we've got on the show today. Mark Ryan is an old friend of mine. And we say old, we use that word very loosely here on the Sword Experience. But Mark, you know, Mark has been in loads of stuff. And you know, some of you might know him from Transformers. He did Bumblebee in Transformers in the video games. He did Ironhide in lots of the Transformer video games. He also choreographed King Arthur, which I want to talk about because King Arthur is. I really like the film. That it's interesting when you listen to the interview we've got for you today. Mark talks about, you know, the trickiness of remaking a couple of things. Those of you out there, what I want you to do is tell me what remakes you thought worked well and what didn't, because I think some work. For me, the relaunch of the Batman franchise was actually, I think it worked. Did that work for you, David?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Christopher Nolan, George Clooney, you know, wonderful actor, but you just can't respect what he did with Batman and Robin. Everyone kind of lost respect for Batman for a little bit, and then Christopher Nolan took it back, and he worked magic with it. And, you know, we'll never forget the Joker. You know, we'll never forget Christian Bale's Batman. That was like what a remake should be.
Yeah, that was what they did. And they're actually trying to do that with Highlander right now, which, you know, is they've been trying to do that for, I think, about 7 years now. I don't know if it's ever going to be made, but I think you're going to have to be difficult. And, you know, what Mark was saying is that there are two English properties that you have to be very careful when you're remaking them. And one is King Arthur, which was one of them, because it's such a legend. It's so ingrained in it. I personally didn't like the latest one, which was with all the special effects and I just thought it took it to an entirely different
that was
area.
The one with Charlie Hunnam, right?
Yes, correct.
I didn't even see that one. So it wasn't good.
Well, you know what? I mean, it wasn't bad, but it just the Legend of King Arthur is almost like it's like a legend, you know, and it's part of folklore history. And when you make it in such a way that has something based in reality, which is what a lot of folklore comes from. Some things were based in reality.
Okay.
If you then change that, then you've kind of gone away from what the original concept was.
That's true. But would you then argue? So are you saying? I'm trying to think of this. So, were you saying that King Arthur, like the newest King Arthur, had too much CGI and too many effects and everything like that? It's strayed too far from the original.
Yes, that's kind of what I'd say. I mean, the reality of it, you can come up with, different action beats, and some of the action beats are great. I mean, I love some of the action ideas that are coming into the films today, and how to CGI and make it more exciting. But then it goes too far. It's like the conversation stops, because what ends up happening is it's all about the visual effects now. It's not about, what is going on in this particular piece. Is he trying to get to this guy's... Is he trying to goad this guy? Is he trying to crush him? What's the conversation they've been having just before this entire special effects sequence happened? And if you get lost there, it kind of loses me. And I mean, the one that was the one that Mark did, and we'll get to the second one afterwards, because he was part of both of them, which was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But the one that I liked was, it had a bunch of big stars in it. It was
Clive Owen, Keira Knightley.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and what he said was, it was difficult. And I mean, to choreograph everybody all at once. I mean, a lot of people are choreographing that. He actually choreographed the fights in that scene, in that film, and. I mean, I liked him. I thought he did a good job. It was well done. I actually think, I actually used one of them in the Sword Experience. It was events. It's for those of you that didn't know which King Arthur I'm talking about right now. It's King Arthur was done in 2004.
Right.
So this is it's what, 14? Oh my gosh! 15,
don't say it. Don't say it.
Oh my
don't
Lord.
say it.
Oh my goodness!
It was a year after the first Pirates of the Caribbean came out, so Keira Knightley was a hot pick for movies at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it was an unusual reinterpreting of King Arthur, as a Roman officer rather than a medieval knight.
Right.
But it still has some sort of basis in history, because he was talking about. How it went into the Druids, and had a great cast: Mads Mikkelsen, Joel Edgerton, Ray Winston, Ray Stevenson, Stephen Delaney, Stellan Skarsgård. I mean, Til Schweiger. I mean, it had a huge, as well as obviously, it was actually done by Antoine Fuqua.
Okay.
And Clive Owen, obviously, and Ian Grufford.
Yes.
I know as well. But it was done, and you're here, Mark. Actually, we'll get to that interview. Let's talk with Mark. Let's jump to Mark.
Let's dive
first
in
of all,
right
and then we'll be right back.
Cool.
Hello, Mark. How are you, man?
All right, mate. How you doing, Mush?
Good. You're in sunny Holland at the moment, are you?
I am in sunny Holland, and I'm looking out over a field of tulips, which is quite beautiful, actually. It's been amazing watching these tulips come up with this field of red, literally disappearing off into the distance. So
isn't that part of like the tiptoe through the tulips thing? And some those of you that don't know what that is, it's a famous English song.
Well, sung by Tiny Tim at one point in the proceedings.
That's right, yeah. Now we're aging ourselves here, Mark.
You were a big fan of Tiny Tim, though, weren't you? Weren't you like a big... Wasn't he like your hero for some time?
No.
I thought
Where'd you get that from?
It's on the internet. It will be as soon as I hang up. As soon as I hang up on this call, it'll be on the internet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's it. You'll be like, Adrian Paul likes Tiny Tim, tiptoe through the tulips. Listen to him sing it. Yeah, right.
Anyway, so here we are in splendid isolation, and it's the weather's last week was beautiful, and then it's cooled off a bit. We had a bit of rain yesterday, but it's been quite nice, really.
Well, listen, thanks for joining me. I don't want to take all your time up, because I know you're a busy man, like all of us at the moment. We're really, really busy.
where I am so busy. I literally get up in the morning. I am on calls from the first thing in the morning till last thing at night.
And you use that net in the background there to catch the fish. Is that what it is?
That is actually my good lady wife's father's fishing net, because he was a bit of a fisherman.
I was a bit of a fisherman.
So, you know, I'm going to use it for chasing butterflies around the garden during the summer. But yeah, I put it up there as I think it just makes it kind of look like it's I'm a fisherman and all that. And the other thing there is actually the boat, the thing you steer the boat with, our boat. So nautical. This room is my office, and it's got a nautical.
It's got a nautical feel to it. There's a theme to it.
It's a theme, yeah. It's got
funny you should talk nautical. You know, I mean, obviously you were on Black Sails, which was very nautical.
I'll do anything for money. I'm not proud. You know.
So listen, you've done a lot of weapons in your life. You've done a lot of stuff like that. And before we started this, you were kind of saying, actually, tell people where you started all your weapons stuff and your action stuff.
Well, the weird thing is, it probably goes back to childhood. I mean, I when people talk about their misspelled childhood. At school, for some reason, I was making swords in the metalwork room and knives, throwing knives and stuff in the metalwork room. And I even made a wooden bokken. Before I knew what a wooden sword was, I actually made one in the woodwork class. And so I used to make them in the cellar down in our house in Doncaster. I had an entire armory, everything from short swords to long swords to broad swords. No, I did. It was bizarre. And I was just interested in the whole thing. And my first real trainer was a guy called Michael J. I did a bit at stage school, like we all do, you know, because if you're looking at anything Shakespeare, it's got lots of sword fights. So that was part of the curriculum, was a bit of fencing. And my first real fight trainer was a guy called Michael J., who was known as the Twickenham Samurai, because he used to walk around Twickenham with a full Japanese samurai suit of armor. You might have met him as well, actually.
No, what was his name? Michael J.
Michael J. He was a British Airways pilot. I think he's still out there about somewhere. And he was a 5th or 6th Dan Iaido expert, and he was also an Aikido expert. And I would go down to his dojo, and he would throw me around the place like a rag doll and humiliate me and all that kind of stuff. But he was really the first person that I was introduced to him by Ingrid Pitt, no less, who he was a friend of in Twickenham. But he used to walk around Twickenham as for a British Airways pilot, I want you to think about this, 747 pilot. He used to walk around Twickenham with a full samurai armor suit on. And then he used to fly planes.
I didn't wear that when he was flying. That was rather intimidating. Hello, this is the captain speaking.
I don't think you could fly, because you couldn't be able to grip the controls, would you? With the armor on. Anyway, so he was my first real Japanese sword guys, and he had 2 antique katanas. One was, I believe, was 17th century. And I have to say that was the first time I held a sword in my hand and it felt like the sword was alive. It was so incredibly well balanced. And people think of katanas as being, heavy because it's roll and fold and the density of the blade. This thing literally almost floated in your hand. And he had another one. I can't remember how old that one was. I think that was probably a late 19th century one. But the one that he had that was kind of like a couple of 100 years old was an amazing. It just was not what I was expecting at all. I mean, you were expecting like a repro, weighted, heavyweight blade. It didn't feel like that at all. And it could have been just with the balance. I don't know. The way it was balanced, it was beautiful. And then along came a show called Robin of Sherwood. I did my first stage knife fight in a thing called Dean. A show, my first Dean, about the life of James Dean.
Oh, right, okay.
And I played all the bad guys in James Dean's life, of course.
Of course you did.
And so, of course I did. And I was like the bouncer in East of Eden. but I also was Buzz in Rebel Without a Cause. So in this show, it was famous to show because it was one of the most expensive disasters in West End history, and I was in it, and story of my life really. And we had this knife fight to do, and the guy who was actually the dance choreographer, the dance captain, he was trying to choreograph this knife fight between me and a guy called Glenn Conway, who was playing James Dean. And I don't quite know what he was trying to do, and obviously neither did I, because he was talking about knife fights like was in the film. And I don't know what I did, but I must have probably snickered or something, which he felt I'd insulted him. Because he went, oh, okay, so how, because he's tossing this knife from hand to hand, this flick knife he had to do these fights with. And he said, so how would you do this? And as he went to toss it, I just literally flicked it out of his hand, away in midair. I didn't even think about it. I was just went, oh, do that again. And he did it again. I went, whoosh, and his knife went, whoo. So now I'm the only one with a knife. And so he said, well, you obviously know more about this than I do. Why don't you do it? So I ended up choreographing this little knife fight. We did this knife fight. And that was the first stage fight I was ever in.
Well, what happened after that? I mean, obviously, did you? I mean, what was the first film fight you actually ever did?
First film fight? Oh, yeah. Probably. I did a film called Who Dares Wins about the Iranian embassy scenes, and although it wasn't really a fight, I beat up a policeman, and my mum was very upset with me because she actually went to see the film and she said, "Don't ever do that again." I said, "It's a film, Mum." She said, "Yeah, but I don't want you hitting policemen." I went, it's film. She said, "No, I don't want you ever knocking policemen about again." So yeah, no, in Who Dares...
The director that we changed the script and yeah.
And Lewis Collins, my old mate Lou, God rest his soul wherever you are, he wanted to shoot me. He was desperate to kill me in the film, and he didn't get to shoot me. It was a stuntman called Terry Forrestal, who you may have come across Terry as well at some point. Yeah, Terry was infamous for one of many things. Anyway, he died in a bungee jumping stunt a few years ago. But Terry was actually the bloke that shot me in the face. And Lou was very upset about it because he wanted to shoot me. Everybody wanted to shoot me in the face. They still do.
I understand the feeling, actually. I do get that. So tell me, what's the difference? I mean, and then you were telling me a bit later, you've done a lot of swords. Actually, you and I did a convention a while ago. We were talking about swords and that. What did you do after that in the sword arena or the action arena and stuff? I know.
Really, the show that changed my life was Robin Sherwood and Terry Moss, who was the fight coordinator, who was the stunt coordinator, and he was the sword master. And Terry, basically, we learned so much about not just the action sequences and choreographing them, but how to manage a set with a lot of stuntmen and prep yourself so you could knock out these fights efficiently on the set. He had 7 merry men to train, Ray Winston, myself, Clive Mantle, Michael Praed, and then later on Jason Connery. He had a full complement of merry men to work out fights for, but also he had, we all had to at least be able to, kill 2 or 3 stuntmen. So we had to have our own little stunt team, if you like, that we worked out fights with, so that when they wanted to shoot stuff, because it's like on a TV set, you don't get a lot of time. They go, right, we're ready to shoot now, get in that corner and do a fight. So Terry's technique was that we all learned what became in the industry known as Robin Hood 1, 2, 3. And at one time, every stuntman in the UK knew Robin Hood 1, 2, 3. And you had like 3 or 4 moves for section 1, 3 or 4 moves for section 2, 3 or 4 moves for section 3. And you could change it. So they started with 1, you did 2, they did 3, then you did 3, they do 2, you do 1. Right. And so everybody knew that on the set. So you could get your little 2 guys, stunt guys, and go, okay, I'll start with 3, you do 2, and then you do 1, and then we'll do a kill, and poof. Now, obviously for me, I had 2 swords. So I only trained with a couple of stunt guys because we just dressed them up as different people in most fights. So I got to work with Graham Crowther and Stevie Dent, Denny Powell, Greg Powell came in and did some stuff. We got to work with every stuntman in Great Britain came on to Robin and Sherwood because we went through them like a rate of knots, particularly Ray. What he did, the training technique and the pre-production technique that he did was a great basis for which to use my own stuff. When I've choreographed stuff, I've used that and a mixture of what I learned from Bob Anderson on First Night. And there's a big difference from being the person in front of the camera doing a fight to being the person behind the camera doing the fights with particularly a big cast like Keira Knightley and Stellan Skarsgård and Mads Mikkelsen and that. It's a completely different job. So, all of the stuff I learned from Robin and Sherwood set me up for First Night, and then everything I learned on First Night set me up for the Transformers films, really.
First Night, interesting film. It was. I heard Bob did it. I mean, obviously, I'd worked with Bob for a number of years. Lovely man. We've talked about this before. What do you think was his strength?
And I'll say it because we're recording it. Bob was a big fan of yours. He was very impressed with all of your martial arts skills and your sword skills. He told me that himself because we were talking about it on the set one day. Because obviously we're working, with Richard Gere and he'd worked with just a lot of very famous actors. And I actually said to him, I said, who do you think, was one of the best people that you've worked with? And he said, well, obviously Flynn, because Flynn was just a physical genius. But he said, he said, no, Flynn was remarkable for learning, fight routines and just being able to just do it, physically be able to do it. He said, but no, he said, I've been working with Adrian Paul on, he said, Adrian is one of the best I've ever worked with when it comes to, having all the skills that you need to make a sword fight and an action sequence look good. He was a fan of yours. I asked him and he told me. So I respected Bob, not just because he was, obviously an Olympic fencer, but a lot of people know this about Bob. He was in the Royal Marines during the Second World War, and he was sunk twice. And he was the Royal Marines bayonet fencing champion. When he got into the Royal Marines, he got into bayonet fencing first.
Wow.
And so he was the bayonet fencing champion for the Royal Marines, and that's how he got into fencing. And then he trained throughout the army doing the fencing, and that's how he got into Olympic fencing. So Bob had quite a life. He was sunk twice in 2 major battles. And apparently he was quite handy with a Fairbairn Sykes, combat knife, being a Royal Marine, and was quite a chap. So he was very well respected by everybody. And he was a gentleman,
I mean, what I found best with him was that, he really sort of created a fight from a vision. He didn't just sort of put a sword fight into a room. He went into the room, looked at what was in the room, and then said, okay, let's do this stunt over here. Let's go over here and do the sword fight, and let's go X, Y, Z, So I think he really kind of understood that portion of creating a fight as an artist, as a visual painter.
Absolutely, and I've nicked things from him over the years. Obviously, Bill Hobbs. Bill Hobbs comes from that theatrical tradition of the Royal Shakespeare Company, and I've been asked, and I've said before now, what would you think is the difference between Bill Hobbs and Bob Anderson? I said Bob Anderson is naturally a film brain. He sees a scene as a drama scene, and it's a fight scene, but it's still a drama scene. And he's able to build a fight into a dramatic sequence, as opposed to it just be 2 guys knocking the crap out of each other. His artistry is to turn that into a scene, a real drama scene. And I stole what he said to me. Stellan Skarsgård on King Arthur came to me, and they wanted to get him into this fight with Clive Owen. And Stellan came to me. He said, I don't know what you're going to do with me. He said, I've never held a sword in my hand in my life. Never done it. He said, I've never even been in a fight scene. He said, I'm in my 50s. I chain smoke. What are you going to do? And I said to him, quoting Bob Anderson, I always credited him with this, but afterwards, I said, a fight scene, particularly a sword fight, is a drama scene where the blades have the dialogue. And think of it as each beat of the sword fight is a paragraph of dialogue. Oh, you think you're going to get me? Oh, no, I'm going to try and get you now. Now, oh, that was quite clever. I was impressed by that. But think of it as a drama scene where the swords have actually got the dialogue and you're speaking with the sword play. He went, I get it. Let's do it. Let's do it. I said, it's a conversation in steel. From Bob, I said, it's a sword fight. A good sword fight is a drama scene with a conversation in steel. And Stella went, and his fight with Clive basically stole the film, other than the fight with Mads Mikkelsen, which I think I'm very proud of. But, Now, I can't hear you at all now.
Oh, there we go. I actually muted myself for a minute, so I didn't actually spoil it. But what I was saying was the thing I always tell people is that it is a conversation, and if you don't have the conversation, then the story stops. Therefore, you kind of get taken out of the story that you're watching because the conversation is not continuing in the sword fight itself.
Correct.
You're right.
Absolutely.
The King Arthur fight was. It was a good fight. It was a very memorable fight, as well as was the death of was it Lancelot? I think it was Lancelot.
Well, there's two. There's the one that actually the continuity lady was crying, and actually bawled me out, because when Mads Mikkelsen died, he's playing Tristan. He looks up at the eagle. He looks up at the bird, and Stellan kills him with this cross.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, God, she absolutely, this continuity lady came out. I was stood outside and they did it so well. Mads did it so well. And she came out and she was crying. And literally out of the video village, and she went, you bastard. She said, I've never that is the most cruel. I said, but it's the drama in the scene. That's the whole point of it. We need the audience to go, this guy is the bad guy. He's merciless. And now King Arthur has to avenge this cruel, merciless death. And so there was that one that was, and Johan Grufford that played Lancelot did the two-handed.
Yeah, I remember Johan. Yeah.
Lovely guy, super guy.
He's married to Alice Evans, a friend of mine. So I know Johan.
Oh,
when they first met, actually, right. when she was doing 101 Dalmatians with Glenn Close. So I've known her for years, and Johan actually he did the Fantastic Four, didn't he? And then he went on to he's doing something else as well right now, which he was shooting actually, I think, in New Zealand.
Yeah, he got that straight after King Arthur. And I'll never forget him coming out to the training area in Ireland. And he knew he had to do these two-handed sword fights. And he was literally looking at me going, no, how are we going to do this? And so the first thing I taught him was some of the original Nazir moves, which is cycling the swords through like this. And he started to do that. And he went, I can get this because he's Welsh. I can be able to do this. And so he went through the entire film wearing this black leather costume with his hair all curled up and a little goatee beard. And it wasn't even, and the sword's on his back. And it wasn't until the end of the film, in one of the interviews that he said, little did I know, I went through the entire film and I am doing actually an ode to Mark Ryan and Nazir. The whole thing is a Welsh accent.
Did you teach him the choreography for that, or the sword for that, or who did the choreography on there?
I choreographed every sword fight there. I choreographed
on King Arthur.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. See, I didn't.
And if I didn't choreograph it, the stunt guy.
Sorry, go ahead.
I choreographed all the sword fights, but even the fights that if the stunt guys came in, I had final say over the axe fights, the knife fights, the whole thing. So I was involved with designing all the action for all of the nights, whether it was knife fights, axe fights, sword fights. I was involved with the whole thing. A year of my life it was great fun.
I mean, King Arthur's been done a couple of times. They did the most recent one, which it's taken it into this fantasy drama, like all this visual effects stuff now, which Okay, I get you kind of it's a fantasy, but there are certain things you just don't remake in that thing. And I think King
Uh,
Arthur is such a legend. It's such a base. I just don't think it's the type of thing you want to make into all these visual effects and these like weird things that he's got and these spirits. And I'm like, oh, all right, it kind of takes away from what I think is the original element of it, because there's an element of what's it called legend and truth. If you take it into that, then it becomes, you just kind of throw away the legend and everything that's come before.
there are two British iconic concepts, legends that really you've got to be very careful with. Obviously, Arthur is one because it's so archetypal.
Correct.
And the imagery, if you just think of the imagery of the Lady of the Lake and all of that, it's so deeply ingrained within the British psyche. And the other is Robin Hood. If you go too far with Robin Hood,
Right.
you lose that track as well. It just becomes another bloke with a bow, and Arthur becomes another bloke with a sword. Right. Because if you don't connect to the emotional thread of those stories and you just call it King Arthur or Robin Hood or whatever, you lose the emotional impact of what the whole look of the story is about.
Do you think there's a big difference between films that were made, let's say, in the 80s and 90s to the ones that are made today?
I think that what happens is that name recognition, you go into a studio and some folks will go, I want to make, a remake of The Man, for let's say, and I'm not criticizing the film itself, but let's say you go and you go, oh, I want to remake The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Now, I love The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and I love the way that it was set up in the 60s, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. So if you start fiddling with that too much in the dynamic of the relationship, you kind of, again, you gut out of it the best elements. And I think that there was a fashion a while ago where you went in with you'd bought a name recognition project and went in and went, we're going to remake this, we're going to remake that. And so went, oh yeah, that's a great idea. We haven't done that for a while. And so these films got made, but they're so far from the heart of the legend or the story or what makes it, what gets the audience involved. They're so far from that because they want to make it different that you lose contact with the audience. They sit there and go, what is this?
Yeah, I mean, that's I think, as I said, some things don't need to be remade. Some things get remade and they're actually better. So it really depends on the genre, I think, sometimes.
Tell me, I'm curious. Tell me what of a remake that you've seen that you went, that's better than the original.
Batman. I think Batman, when they redid and revamped Batman, it gave it a new life. I think they did a good job on it. I think they also did the same thing with James Bond, with Daniel Craig. The grittiness that he brought to it is a really interesting take on it. And obviously there's much more explosions, but you still have the same theme with James Bond. So in a sense, it's not really a remake. It's just a slightly different take on the character. So there's just a couple I think work like that. And I agree. Most of them don't. They don't remake well. I mean, they're trying to remake Highlander right now. So I don't know what's going to happen with that if they ever get it off the ground.
I think both of those that you cited are probably the nearest, and obviously because I've trained Christian Bale. I actually trained Christian Bale for artistry, would you believe? And I think those two stand out because of the quality of the actors. If you look at the actors that have instilled a new element of James Bond or a new element of Batman, it's the actors that have brought something to the parts.
Right. Yeah.
That's a different take. And I agree with both of those. I think Craig's been a great Bond, and I think Christian Bale was a great Batman. So, but it's because of what they've brought to it, because they're both good actors.
What do you think is the hardest thing to do when you train actors?
Interestingly enough, I haven't really had that much trouble. I've had a couple of people who are physically. It's not natural. I've been very lucky. Mads Mikkelsen was a dancer, and there's an old Celtic saying, never give a sword to a man who can't dance.
I remember that one. Never give a sword to a man who can't dance.
And it's true. And Mads could dance, and he moved in such a great way, that graceful, his timing and stuff, sold that whole sequence so well. But I've only really had a couple of people I would go, yeah, and it's usually somebody that either has got a control issue, which comes out of some other psychological thing. And I don't want to get too deep down the rabbit hole with that. A lot of people don't like to be told, don't like that they think they're in control, but really the more control that they want to have only shows the least control they actually have internally. And so most of the people I've worked with that have gone, right, I'm here to learn. I'm here, show me what you can, show me what to do, how to do it, what's the safest way. I've had very little trouble. I've only had trouble a couple of times, and not bad trouble, just they didn't want to do it this way. They wanted to do it that way. They didn't, or they got impatient with the process of the training, where it became dangerous to their partner. And I tried to say to them, it doesn't matter whether you know the fight, the other guy at the end of it also needs to feel safe with you. And if you want to keep going faster and harder, until that person's up to the speed with you, it's not fair. It's an act. You're doing an acting scene, right? And if we want it to look like you're genuinely going to kill him, that's what the director would have asked for, and he hasn't asked for that. This is what we're trying to do. I kind
of take it in the realm of what people refer to in golf as the UGG factor. And the UGG factor is when the adrenaline comes in. You go, ah! It's that thing where, and I've had it. I mean, I've done hundreds of sword fights, and it's that time when suddenly the actor takes over, and they forget that there is supposed to be a connection between the acting and the sword work and the safety, and the UGG factor takes over, and then it becomes like this wild swing, which it has no control. And I think that's when you have the issues when people get injured.
Yeah. I don't know about you. I've only been injured once. I mean, I've had dings on the hands and stuff like that. I'm sure you won't mind me saying this because it's legend. I got stabbed in the face by Richard Gere. He actually caught me right in the eye socket here. I was very lucky, but it was so hard that it actually chipped a piece out of my eye socket, and it was like I'd been bang. It was like being poleaxed. So it stunned me, and I went down on my knees. I wasn't even fighting with him; he was fighting with somebody else, and I'd already tried to impress upon the other person, calm down, because And Richard was trying to get out of the way, and he went like that, and I was stood behind him, and he hit me right in the face.
I know who the other person was.
Let's not say it.
I know who the other person was. I won't mention that.
Anyway, it was, and he's got a career. He works. He's got some issues, and I wish him well. And I would, but you do get that. And this person's issues came from other personal issues. I didn't know that at the time. But the funny thing was, a funny Bob Anderson story was they sent me off to the hospital to get stitched up and micro stitched inside here and make sure he didn't have bits of bone floating about my eye socket. And so I had a big black eye and a stitches at the side of my eye. You can't even see, it's gone now. I'm so old, my wrinkles have taken it away. And I went back to the set. And because I was like, bollocks, I'm not going home. I'm going back to the set. I went back to the set, and Bob was sat there waiting for me. And he said, "What happened?" I said, "Oh, I got poked in the face by Richard. He said, "Why did you parry? Why did you parry? Idiot!" So there was like, no. Oh, let's have a look at that. Oh, you got some stitches. It was like
that's a Bob Anderson thing. I've had. Don't worry, I've been cut in the eye. I've been cut in numerous places. I've had a lot of injuries. Let's just get on to. I want to get on to two other things. I don't want to take too much of your time. Black Sails. We had a quick chat there that you didn't do anything because they said you're too old now to do that. I mean, I'm surprised because that kind of, I guess it all comes down to insurance things now.
It came down to insurance, as I was told. I did try to creep into the fight, given any opportunity. Particularly with the stunt team. They had a great stunt team down there, really good lads. And I tried my best to get into fights until eventually one of the producers actually came down and ordered me out of the gym and ordered the stunt guys not to train with me, even though they wanted to, because obviously they'd done their bit of research. And I was doing these like, 3 guys taking on 3 sword guys with, cutlasses, and even 2 cutlasses at one point. They had me doing. They said, "Can you do this?" I went, "Of course, I can." So doing all this kind of stuff with like 3 stuntmen doing what a 2-handed sword fight. The producer came down and said, "No, not doing that." No.
What about Transformers? Now, Transformers, obviously, you did. I mean, the voice of
Bumblebee, Jetfire. I've been at all of them, mate. I've been everybody. I've been Optimus Prime on the set. I've been everybody. I've been Megatron. Transformers.
Okay.
Wow.
When you say you've been everybody, what do you mean? You were there doing the voices for each of them afterwards on the set. How does it work?
What happens is I am actually on the set with Michael, usually stood by Michael, and looking at his monitor. Depending on the situation, depending on the practicality of it, sometimes this was a learning curve because this had never been done before. And the lesson that Michael learned, I believe, was from the very first Star Wars that they did, where they had everybody on green screens. And you can see that the actors are just like talking to, nothing.
That's one of my big pet peeves on a couple of, not the original Star Wars, there's like 3 in, and I'm not going to mention the actor who I thought was actually, I didn't know what he was doing, didn't know what was going to go on behind him. And I think that's really what you need to know is what's going on so you can react to it. Otherwise, you're just acting to an empty room.
Jeremy, Jerry Zucker, not Jerry Zucker. God, his name will come back to me. What happened was I got hired. They called my agent and said I must have got good feedback from King Arthur, because when I went in to meet Michael one occasion, he was actually playing the soundtrack of King Arthur to a scene he was cutting it in Transformers. And I went, "Oh, this is King Arthur." And he went, "Yeah, you should know that. You had spent a year of your life on that." So, but what they would do was they'd have me on the set, and I would be stood with Michael behind the camera or wherever they could hide me, because this was the first time it had been done. So as the actors were doing dialogue, I would be doing the dialogue with the microphone and the speakers with the actors so they could respond to it. As it got more complicated, they would sometimes hide me under desks and up ladders and hanging from things. No, seriously. And I'd be doing the dialogue with Francis McDormand or Don Turturro or anybody, John Voight, and I'd be doing the dialogue, and they'd put me as close to where the thing was with the light on top. So, and then they would kind of went, "Well, how many voices can you do? Can you do the other voices of all the robots?" So I would literally end up being all of the robots on the set whenever a human being was talking to a robot. And I know it's going to sound mad, but it's absolutely true. I think I've got one of those brains where I can look at something and visualize myself while I'm looking at the set where the robot is. And Michael's like that as well. And why we realized that was because on the very first day of filming, when we did the first scene in the house in LA, where the cars pull up and they're in the garden in the very first film, Mike said he came over, he said, "Come and look at this and just, this is what we're trying to do." And he had the robots hiding underneath the house and around the house. And he showed me the scene, and I started to laugh. And he looked at me and he went, "Can you see that?" I went, yeah, it's funny." He went, "What's funny?" I said, "You've got giant alien robots hiding under a house in urban Los Angeles, in California." I said, "It's funny." He said, "They're all sort of like hiding." He went, "You can see that?" I said, "Yes." He went, "We're going to be fine." And so I think he would say to me on occasions, he would go, "Optimus there, Megatron there, Bumblebee there." And he would just literally point. And I know it sounds mad. I could see them. I would be able to, in my mind's eye, do the dialogue with the actor, wherever they were stood, and see where the robot was.
So,
and how they would.
Tell me a little bit how they shot that, because obviously you said a light. They would put a light up to basically make the actor look from that particular perspective.
Correct. Yeah. So they would have a pole, ILM, and his guys. They were fantastic. Scott's guys were fantastic. They would have a pole with a light on top, so the actor could look up at it and do the dialogue to the light. sometimes they would put me on a ladder or a gantry, like we did once at Edwards Air Force Base, up there as well, so I could do the dialogue off to the side. So although they're looking at the light, they're seeing me, they're getting the voice from the same place. And then over the period of 5 films, we got to the point where we could put speakers in the right place and hide me in the right place. And the actors then could do the dialogue, sometimes kind of looking at me, not looking at me. And it took a while. I mean, I'm sure Frances McDormand doesn't mind me saying this. I think it was the third film, she came in to play somebody. And I was just sitting there quietly minding my own business. And she grabbed me. And she said, everybody tells me you're the robot guy. I said, yeah, I'm the robot. I'm the robot guy. She said, I have no idea what I'm doing. I said, you have to stay close with me and help me, because I have no idea where I'm looking. I have no idea what's going on. I said, don't worry. We will walk through it together, and I'll give you a clue. And I'm probably one of the only people ever that's walked into a Michael Bay shot after he shouted action, basically stopped it, because she was literally going, no idea where she was, what robot she was looking at. And so in the middle of it, she looked around, and he'd already called action. And she went, as if to go, I have no idea. And so I ran out into the middle of the thing and went, I'm going to give you this line. Optimus is there. What Megatron's there. Blah, 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 blah. I'll give you the line. We just do it. But anyway, Mark, what are you doing to my? You did my shot. Get out my goddamn shot. And I just said something like, your Oscar-nominated actress would like to know what the line was. So, well, get out of my shot. Get out of my goddamn shot. Okay. So that's the kind of relationship that we had. And I have to say, I enjoyed it. I had a ball. 10 years of my life doing that, being a giant alien robot.
So what do you got coming up next? I hear that you're writing some stuff at the moment, or you're prepping some stuff.
Yeah.
In this post-COVID environment.
Post-COVID environment. Well, the funny thing is, I've actually been working all the way through the COVID environment. I had a graphic novel called The Pilgrim, which was the great legendary comic artist Mike Grell and writer we did a few years ago, and there suddenly was interest in redoing the Pilgrim. So we did a Kickstarter for that, and we're out there right now finishing off that whole process for the Pilgrim graphic novel, which is getting very interesting responses, particularly in Los Angeles. I've got, we're redoing the Greenwood Tarot. Many years ago, I wrote a thing called Greenwood Tarot, which became kind of a legendary little thing on its own, right, cult thing. And it's been out of circulation for 30 years. So we're going to do a reprint of it ourselves, because it's been counterfeited so many times. So we're going to do a republication of that. So we've been working on that. And I'm involved with several projects. I've got a film to come out directed by Neil Marshall called The Reckoning. Neil's a mate of mine from Black Sails. Robin, a Sherwood fan, good lad. And that's to come out during the summer, The Reckoning. But I'm going to shoot a little thing called The Asset with Martin Webster, which we've got out there. I'm going to help produce a film called 165 Days, which is with Asad Qureshi, which is an amazing story about him, a real life story about him being kidnapped by the Taliban. What else have we got? We've got several things floating about out there at the moment, either in production, partly finished, or will be finished during the course of the year. There's a show I really want to do called Ruby, which is about a female detective in Bradford, which is really gritty, and it's Bradford Noir, they're calling it. Yorkshire Noir, because everybody's doing noir. Guy.
Noir, that's right.
So I've got into producing. I've gone back into writing a bit, but I'm doing a bit of producing myself. Anything to earn a crust. You know me. I'm not proud.
Yeah. Well, Mike, listen. Thanks for joining us today with all these stories. I wish you all the best, and I'm sure I'll see you soon. Well, yeah, sure, I'll see you very, very soon.
Well, I'm going to take you, when I can get a flight back to Los Angeles, to McLeod's in Van Nuys, which is my local boozer. In Van Nuys, there is actually a bar, a mini brewery, microbrewery called McLeod's, and you're going to go, McLeod, you're going to go to the McLeod's.
Yes.
Yes. Jason Connery is now...
Connery thing going there, aren't you?
Jason's now listening to this revolving in Scotland, where he is at the moment. But yeah, we're going to go to McLeod's and I'll buy you a pint.
All right. Well, I look forward to it, man.
All right, mate.
Okay, so you heard there. I mean, Mark's guy had quite a career so far,
to say the least.
You know, I mean, he's really kind of broadened out. But I kind of like what he said about King Arthur. You know, and about the moments we talk about a lot about moments when we do the sword experience about how you need to know your character and what that's talking about. And the whole thing he talks about Tristan. Was kind of interesting. Yeah,
no, I mean, well, first of all, let me just shout out to Tristan because I really like Mads Mikkelsen as an actor. But yes, no, the thing he was saying about Tristan was, as you said, incredibly interesting.
Yeah, you had to have that moment. There was a moment when he's looking up at the eagle, and it's incredibly sad. It brings something to the sword fight, the meaning of the sword fight, the meaning of the fight.
It adds feeling to it, and like. When there's sword fighting going on, there's always feelings of raw passion in the sword fight, but it's the reflecting after the sword fight too that happens that really makes, not only the people that were involved in the sword fight think, but makes the people that were witnessing the sword fight think and realize why they were fighting in the first place.
Have you ever heard of the saying, you need the audience to catch up to the action?
Yes, I have. And
which basically means you need those pauses so that you can register what you've just seen and react to it.
Yes.
And it's like if you beat your head against the wall several times, you don't know that it's hurting eventually because you just get numb.
Right. No, you can't have movies that are just action, because then the audience doesn't have time to reflect. They don't have time to catch up. They don't have time to pause. And I think that's what that Tristan scene really, really enveloped, was letting the audience catch up to everything that had just happened.
Yeah, and of course, Mark and I both worked with Bob Anderson, who was a dear, dear friend. I loved him so much, that man. He was such a gentleman, as Mark mentioned in the interview. He was such a gentleman. And
the fact that Bob Anderson said that you were one of the best non-combative people that he ever worked with, I mean, that's got to mean something. Guessing.
It does. I mean, I was it surprised me actually when I heard it. It was
Did Mark Ryan was Mark Ryan saying that the first time you ever heard that?
No, not on this interview. I'd heard it before.
Okay.
I paid him to say that in this interview.
Gotta have that shout out. Sponsored by Mark Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Mark Ryan. But the other thing he was talking about was the other thing that I was mentioning at the beginning, which are the two things that you shouldn't remake or be very careful that you remake. And the other one was Robin Hood, which he actually worked on as the series.
Right.
And again, that's the same type of thing. Robin Hood. How many Robin Hoods have there been? Do you know?
I was looking at the Wikipedia article for it, and they have it sectioned off by decade. Actually, there's probably
by decade.
Yes, exactly. So it's like you want animated, you got Disney. You want comedy, you got Mel Brooks. You want action, you actually have one that Ridley Scott did with Cate Blanchett and Russell Crowe in 2010. The Wachowskis actually were going to do a Robin Hood, but they decided not to for whatever reason. It was a canned project. So when it comes to Robin Hood, you've got your pick of the litter.
Yeah, gosh, yeah. I mean, there's actually 7 real versions of it from what I get. This is the Independent UK have quoted this, and I'm like, that's a lot. Think about it. You're remaking something that now is really part of folklore and folklore history. So I think you've got to be really careful as to what you're remaking, how you're remaking it. As Mark talked about Batman as well. Funny enough, that we mentioned that, but But listen, let's get back because I want to get back to what Mark has got to say because he's also going to talk a little bit about Transformers, I believe.
Perfect.
And some other things. So let's get back and listen to the rest of Mark's interview.
Let's do it. And I'm ready to clap.
Okay, ready. This is part 3 of Mark Ryan. 3, 2, 1. Okay. And we're back again. Oh gosh, there's so much. We should do this as a 2-hour show.
This has been a very informative one. Mark Ryan's got a lot
he always
to
does.
talk about.
Mark does like, Ryan here. They named it after him, I think.
Oh, all right. There you go.
No, Mark will kill me for saying that. No, but I mean, the whole thing about keeping safety, which is another thing we constantly talk about the sword experience, is about how you have to safely do it, because when you get into doing a choreography or a fight with somebody, you've got to put your ego aside. I know you've got to get your acting together and portray the character, but you have to be able to do the movement safely and give the aggression that you're trying to do with the character. I've done it many times where people they lose control and swords break, people get injured and things like that happen, and I just don't think that's right. Really, it's not fair. But
heat of the moment.
I know. But the one that Mark is obviously known for as well, the big audience. Maybe a lot of you know about the Transformers that he did, that we talked about at the very beginning of the show. I didn't even know that he actually went on set, and he's sitting there and Ridley's like, can you walk over there and start doing the dialogue over there so that he could.
And so he was hovered above the
I mean, a lot of the time he'd have him, put him in a certain position. He'd climb up to an area. If it was like 10 feet up, 15 feet up, he'd have him climb up the thing and then do the voice from up there, or do the voice close by, because otherwise he couldn't. The actor couldn't react to it. It's hard. I mean, think about it. I mean, so you're reacting to nothing really.
Right. No, you got to wonder what like Mark Wahlberg or Shia LaBeouf was like. It's like, they're supposed to be talking to this massive, imposing robot, and really they're just looking at Mark up there, and he's, shouting these lines at him and everything like that. And it's like, you got to pretend that that's Optimus or Ironhide.
Yeah,
I
mean, he did do the voices for that anyway, but, obviously, this is where CGI and action work, because you've got the actors acting with something. With a piece of CGI, rather than it being an explosion or something that's added afterwards that the actor has no clue about. The one that I hated was one of the first remake of one of the Star Wars movies where I've forgotten the actor. The actors came in, and even some really good actors, when they were acting, they had nothing. They didn't know what they were reacting to, and it was so flat. It was like
they're in a big green
room, so
room.
they can't react to anything. Now, this is obviously when. Green screens, massive green screens were the first things that came out. Were the thing to work with, and people really didn't know quite what to do. Today's different. I mean, it's 20 years on now, so people have a little bit more experience doing it. Yeah,
exactly. It's the norm.
I still think it's kind of tough.
Yes, but, definitely.
Anyway, we're running out of time. We've run out of time. I can't believe we've run out of time very quickly.
Yes. Nope. It's been a heck of a podcast.
I really like this one with Mark. Mark obviously has a lot to talk about. He was, as I mentioned, he was actually in Holland. So that was a long distance interview that we did with him. He was.
Oh wow! Okay.
He was.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, obviously he's locked down like everybody else is. I'm so happy that now the lockdowns have kind of eased up a little bit. Hopefully they will stay that way. All of you out there, stay safe. I mean, we brought the
stay safe.
The Sword Experience online Patreon stuff on purpose so that you had something to do. I mentioned that at the beginning of the podcast, but
exactly. No, by all means, we want you to stay active. We want you to stay, connected with everyone. Just because we can't come to you right now doesn't mean that we can't come to you in a different way, which is why we did the whole online version of this all. So,
and thank you to all of you that did have signed up for Patreon, because that helps us kind of move all of this along. Obviously, this is a free podcast. But a shout out to everybody that's doing all the training at the moment, as well as getting some of the film fight insights. The last button kind of went pretty good.
Oh yeah, talk about the film fight insights. Really quick.
I'm going to pick something, or people can ask me which one, or they'll tell me, I want to pick Star Wars, or I want to pick First Night, or I want to pick this. Can you do some scenes from that? And I'll pick a film, and we'll talk about the acting, we'll talk about the historical reenactment of it, we'll talk about the weapons, we'll talk about whether the fight was good, whether the actor knew what he was doing, all those types of things. It's fun to actually find all this stuff, and I learn a lot of stuff while I'm doing it.
Yes, there's a lot of movie trivia that you just don't think about. So if you guys saw the Duelist one, just keep letting us know what you think, because that one was a really fun one to research. And also, thank you all for the praise and everything that we're getting for the training as well, because we work hard with doing the training and everything, and we're glad that everyone who's taking part in the training is getting something out of it, because as we said, we really like keeping you active during this during the whole stay safe at home kind of thing, and we just love that you're doing the training and love that you're, staying active.
And on that note, this is Adrian Paul and David Bethke. I remember who you are, David, even though I don't see you. That's just and we'll bring you another podcast next time. We're going to be talking with Yancey Arias, a good friend of mine. I actually worked with him on Dead Men Can't Dance. He's been recently in Queen of the South. So until then, be safe, keep training.
Talk to you guys later.